thank you so much for joining us this morning.
No, I appreciate the invite and you guys having me.
Well, I want to get started because I want to just recap 2025 in the Senate. Let's talk, what are the top headlines coming out of your chamber this year?
You know, I think you start with the budget. You know, that's the most important thing that we do every session. We had a budget that cut taxes by $1.5 billion. We had to work with negotiating that with the governor because he had some priorities, and we wanted to make sure that he would actually sign a tax cut. The previous session, in the budget, he vetoed out the tax cut. We sent him separate bills with tax cuts in, and he vetoed. And going into the session with over $4 billion surplus, a $4.5 billion surplus, we felt it was very important to give some of that back to the hardworking families of Wisconsin. So that's probably the most important thing we did this session when people are dealing with high grocery prices, you know, increasing costs of inflation, to keep more money in their pockets. So that tax cut was split between the middle class and then retirees, exempting a lot of retiree income for those retirees who are having a hard time paying their mortgages and their bills.
And I want to ask too, because that budget was passed kind of under pressure for that federal deadline. Do you still feel like it was successful and got everything you wanted done?
You know, in a budget, there's always things that you don't like and things that you do like. That's part of the process of governing, working with the governor, working with the other side, making sure you can rally 17 votes. But there are so many good things that were in that budget. You mentioned the money for the hospitals. You know, we invested in rural roads again, rural roads and bridges, $200 million into rural roads and bridges. You know, taking high-cost special education up to 90%, taking special education up to 42% in the first year and 45% in the second year, the biggest increase in special education in state history. So we're really proud of all the sort of different things that we got accomplished in the budget.
And I want to talk to you about this cost of living and affordability, because that is one of the top, if not the top issue for voters. Our Marquette Law School poll found it's the top issue. Do you believe that the state legislature has adequately tackled that issue this year?
You know, a lot of that is controlled by what the federal government does, driving inflation with setting interest rates, things like that. With the Fed, all we can do is control how much money we're taking from you and giving back to you. Well, that's the most essential way that we can help. So that's why we felt it was so important that when people get their tax returns next year, they're going to have more money. They're probably going to get a bigger refund. They're paying less in taxes.
So you're saying the legislature has done a good amount?
Yes.
And I want to talk to you because during a press conference ahead of the last floor session, Democrats criticized the calendar for what they said did not address affordability enough. What's your response to that?
Well, if you look at some of the bills they've introduced, they're definitely not worried about holding the line on costs. They had a local government package of bills that lets local governments increase sales taxes by more than almost 20%, increase your sales tax that, you know, low income people are paying when they're just buying clothes and things like that. Another bill that was just introduced is bringing special education up to 90% reimbursement, some sufficient. That would bankrupt our state. I mean, we would have to raise taxes on everybody to cover expenses like that. So I'd like to see some of the bills that they would suggest to get done to actually control it, but everything they do is actually every bill that they try to get done actually raises costs on families.
Well, I want to talk too, because during that press conference, I believe you were asked this similar question, pointed to the vote for ending that partial veto, the 400-year veto for the Evers administration. But there's been concerns because in 2024, we saw a record number of school districts go to referendum. What do you say to those voters who are now worried about having to pay from their property taxes to fund their schools?
You know, Will just did a press release in a study, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, that over the last decade, there's 55,000 less students and I'm going to get the number wrong, so maybe I shouldn't have started with this number, but there's substantially less students, I believe around 55,000 less students in public education, but the amount of staffing has gone up by over 3,000, I believe the number was, statewide. So, I mean, school districts need to start working on consolidation. And a lot of that increase was done during the pandemic when they had COVID money, so they were hiring new employees, which it was supposed to be one-time money, so a lot of schools are acting irresponsibly.
And so I know we saw a package of bills to incentivize school districts to consolidate. But Democrats, again, kind of pushed back, saying that that's not fixing the funding formula issues with school districts. What's your response to that? Is that something that the Senate would look at next year?
You know, I think we've had 3 budgets in a row with some of the largest increases for K-12 education in state history. So we're continuing to, I think, fund education responsibly.
And I want to move now to an announcement you recently made, which was a special committee to investigate the Wisconsin Department of Justice. In a press release, you said the investigation will look into operations, priorities, and external influences affecting the DOJ. Why create this special committee?
You know, they've taken some money from special interest groups to hire attorneys that aren't part of the Department of Justice, that are filing, we believe, frivolous lawsuits around the state of Wisconsin. So we want to look into if there's state funding going into this. It's important to protect taxpayer money and not hire special interest people, attorneys, to come in and just not do the will of the people and start attacking businesses and people around the state of Wisconsin.
Is that what you're expecting to find in this, or are there other things that you think might come up from this investigation?
You know, we'll let the committee do its job. I think I've appointed 4 very diligent people on this committee to look into what's going on.
And do you feel like, or I should say, have you spoken with the DOJ at all about this committee?
Nope.
And now I kind of want to move ahead looking to 2026. I wanted to ask what a successful year for Republicans in your chamber would look like.
You know, 2026, the beginning of the year is a long, for session or elections?
We'll start with session and we'll move to elections because there's a lot to talk about.
I was going to say elections are a long ways away, but no, we have 3 months left in session, January, February, March. We plan on coming to the floor all 3 months and still taking up bills. Bills are still being introduced, working through committees, so we'll do our job vetting these bills and trying to get some good legislation done that can hopefully hold the line on costs for citizens around Wisconsin and do things that are good for Wisconsin.
Are there specific bills that you're excited about at this point?
You know, not too terribly excited about, but you know, we're working on bills through the process.
So nothing catching your eye quite yet, but we'll see what comes up.
Right.
Well, I want to ask now, too, let's move a little bit to that elections, because it is a little bit further into 2026, but Democrats need just 2 seats to flip the Senate next year. Are you worried about losing control of the chamber?
I'm not. I think we have some very good incumbents that are planning to run again. We've already have candidates challenging in Democrat seats. You know, I think we typically outperform the top of the ticket in our state Senate candidates, and you know, we have candidates like Senator Mark Line, who's already out there knocking on doors. People who are just known in their districts, who are well respected in their districts, and we feel we're going to have a very successful election. What
would it mean for Wisconsin, hypothetically, if Democrats win that chamber next year?
They're not going to.
So you're not even worried about it? You seem very confident.
Yep.
All right. Well, I want to move now to if there's a little bit of unfinished business you think from 2025 that you would like to tackle next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the one thing that hopefully we can potentially get done, and there's 3 competing bills right now, is dealing with THC. The 2018 Farm Bill, which we signed into Wisconsin state law, accidentally legalized THC. Now it's a business all around the state of Wisconsin with people producing these products. There's nothing in state statute regulating these products, so they could be sold to minors. There's nothing with packaging, how it's distributed, things like that. So there's 3 competing bills, which shows the challenge in getting something done when there's 3 different visions sort of how to handle this. But I think it's important just for regulation and safety when you have an intoxicating substance that's being produced and consumed in Wisconsin to have regulation around it.
Yeah, and I've talked with some of those business owners, and they say they do want regulation because it would make their industry safer and make the market safer. Right. But I want to ask, is there a specific bill that you are in favor of?
Not at this point. We're just trying to build consensus because it's so important just to get regulation done.
And do you see that being successful this year?
I hope so. I think it's imperative that we get it done.
And I want to ask, too, because marijuana in Wisconsin keeps coming up year after year. Would you be in favor of legalizing recreational or medical marijuana?
We've been looking at medical marijuana. We had a nice caucus discussion about it. I'm not sure if we're there yet, but it needs to be, I think the bill that's out there does a good job of regulating it and making sure it's not a slippery slope to full recreational marijuana. But I think that would be an important first step to go that route. I don't know if we can rally the votes for it, but yeah.
Do you feel like it's moving forward in a way it hasn't in the past now?
You know, I think it still might have a challenge in the Assembly to get done, even if we can get it done in the Senate, but it's important to have those discussions.
Yeah, have you talked to Robin Vos about that? I know he's historically been a little bit more critical about this kind of legislation.
I have not.
And now I just kind of want to ask kind of a last question here for you, which is I asked your counterpart in the Senate the same question. If you had to grade the Senate this year, what grade would you give it?
I'd give us a solid B, B+. You know, we got a budget done. We've gotten a whole slew of bills on the governor's desk, some that he signed, some that he's vetoed, but no, I think we're moving forward in a good fashion.
And to get to an A, what would that take?
I think having a strong spring session in January, February, March, getting some good legislation done.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.